Welcome, session 5. You may not have thought we'd get there. Session 4 was shorter than the previous ones because I'm cognizant I gave you some books to read and about negotiation. So don't just take my word for it, take the words of other people, more skilled than I am. But session 5, it runs on from the topics that we covered in session 4, which is heads of terms and specifically due diligence. So due diligence, there's only one beneficiary, and that ain't you if you're selling. I've never known in 20 years and 360 successful transactions anyone to come out of due diligence and the buyer to say, do you know what, this is a far better business than we thought, we're going to up our offer. Never, ever. The best you can hope for is the offer remains intact as is. It's only going to go one way if it's going to go, and it's going south. So do be mindful that the due diligence process is for the sole benefit of the buyer, not for the seller. Mentioned a couple of times, it's really important that you disclose relevant material at the right time. And heads of terms should only be the key terms. Again, some lawyers fall into the trap of wanting to dot I's and cross T's and the nth degree, and deal fatigue just sets in and the whole thing collapses. They still get paid, of course, for their time, but you haven't sold your business. It's a real skill knowing how much detail to put in and how much to leave out. So that's very much a discussion between buyer and seller, and if you've got a good advisor on board, they will give you guidance as to what's reasonable to put in and what's unreasonable to put into heads of terms, but have it in the sale purchase agreement that's going to follow 2 or 3 months down the line. So it should only be the key planks, the key terms that's in heads of terms. So those are clarified. Something that comes in sometimes, if the seller's feeling bold, is an abandonment fee or a deposit from the buyer. So the situations that would come in, if the buyer pulls out or is being unreasonable, whatever the legal definition of unreasonable is, that there's a payment made to you as the thwarted seller. Now, again, any experienced acquirer is likely to pick up on that, but you should be having your advisor crafting up the heads of terms, draft heads of terms. Why not put that in? Don't ask, don't get. It might be that they pay you a 50k or 100k deposit because you don't know whether they're going to go the distance. And you can say to them, I'm incurring lawyer costs, additional accountancy costs. I've got my M&A advisory firm that are charging me by the month on their monthly retainer. Why not? Have it in there. Maybe you do concede on that thing, but then you trade it with something else. So you're trading with something you didn't really think you'd get anyway. So there's a little tip. So an abandonment fee is if the buyer pulls out. Maybe they don't get maybe there's the funding gap. Maybe they haven't got the money, or they now haven't got the funds to complete on the deal. They pay you an abandonment fee for your time, trouble and costs. Have a go. You probably picked up from several of my clients, you've got to pick the right commercial or corporate lawyer. Someone who's experienced, pragmatic. Every lawyer should know the law, should do. And they all sit exams. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pragmatism. I'm talking about a lawyer or a law firm that wants to get the deal over the line. They're still protecting your legal interests, but they're pragmatic. They're not going into a sword fight with the other side's lawyers to the nth degree. They've got to have some degree of pragmatism, they've got to be able to liaise with you, and they've got to be able to keep to deadlines on timescales. If you don't know who the right lawyers are, have a word with me. I know a few really great ones that I've worked with and had my clients work with. But it's essential, because if you pick the wrong lawyer, it could scupper the deal. So it might be that you've got a good business, but it's just been made unsaleable because you picked the wrong law firm for whatever reason. And I have said, accountants go in this as well. If your accountant's not up to the job, change them. And I find this has to happen in due diligence quite regularly. Do have your advisor remind everyone of the agreed completion date, because that can slip really easy in people's minds. And one tip is to have weekly review meetings with all parties, both sets of lawyers, the accountants, buyer and seller, obviously, the decision makers, and there might be one or two other people. That's a big call, and that needs to be facilitated by your advisor. So again, if your advisor, your M&A advisor can't do that or is not there, get the right advisor. You do need someone to facilitate that, and weekly is probably, we found, and I found, weekly is probably about right, because things can slip. It does make me chuckle. I'm not surprised anymore where we agree what a reasonable price is for our client's business or an aspirational price. I'll give you an example of one. I had some personal involvement a little while back. She said that she wanted to sell for 10 to 12 million. Well, that's always an interesting, well, is it 12 or is it 10? But anyway, 10 to 12 million was her aspirational price, although she would accept 8 million. But aspirationally, 10 to 12. We got her up to 22 million. Took a bit longer. Had a lot of people vying for the business. Guess what? When we got to 18 million, she wanted more than 20. And when we got to 22 million, she wanted to see if we could push it to 25. She wanted, at the start of the process, she wanted 10 to 12, was prepared to accept 8. I'm ambivalent about this, because I do understand on one side, this could be a one-off transaction for the seller. This could be your retirement or next chapter in your life. It matters. And most business owners don't have adequate pension provision. So this deal matters. So I do understand that you want to get as much as possible, to squeeze the lemon as much as you can. But there is a point where you could cheese off the buyer. So it's got to be done with some grace. It's got to be done with some panache to keep increasing the offers, particularly if you're playing one buyer off against another, because you've created competitive tension, as you should, as I've recommended. But do remember not to get too greedy, because if you push it too far, deal's gone. Now you've got nothing, the square root of nothing. Okay, you've still got the business, but you wanted to sell it because you were tired of it all and you didn't have enough time for your grandchildren and going out to Mediterranean countries or whatever. So do make sure that enough is enough. Anyway, 22 million is what she got and she's very happy. And why wouldn't you be? It is really important. This is a soft issue, and I've learned this through trial and error, actually. You've got to maintain the goodwill in a transaction. Even if, as the seller, you might take offence at something that's done or said, try to respond with good grace and try to keep it on a polite and professional and friendly manner, because it is easy for goodwill to evaporate. And once goodwill evaporates, then you turn to the lawyers. Then people become in entrenched positions. And it's quite difficult then to actually get the deal to move forward, because people are too camped up in their own positions and they're not prepared to move forward or find creative ways around something. So it is really important to keep the goodwill going. That doesn't mean over a glass of red wine. There have been meetings that have been in a bar, and they're not the places to negotiate. They're the places to celebrate once the money is in your bank account and you can open up, not with a glass of red wine, but it's a bottle of champagne. It is, as the seller, and it's true of the buyer, but I'm talking about sellers now, do try and be flexible. Again, don't concede, but trade. So trade things that have less value to you but high value to the acquirer, and try to accommodate them wherever you can without crossing those red lines that you have, or those lines in the sand you have. But there is a lot of wriggle room in the middle if both parties are willing to look at that. Yeah, I may be repeating myself. I make no excuses for it. Choose the right lawyers. Because you want the deal to remain intact, and a bad lawyer will kill the deal. Guarantee it. They will kill the deal. People say a lot of things, don't they? But they often get business amnesia, or they forget what they committed to. So these weekly meetings that I'm suggesting you have with buyer and seller, with you and the buyer, with the law firms and representatives from the law firms and with the accountants, make sure that the key actions are documented, and you can refer to them the next week, or your business advisor can, that's selling your business, to make sure that things that were promised they would action have been done, or if it's something that's going to take longer than a week, that they're making progress, and if so, how much progress. It really is beholden on someone driving that process, because if you let it be, it's likely to go into the buffers, or onto the green if you're into the rough rather, if you're a golfer, not onto the green, because that's where you want to be, but into the rough is where you don't want to be, and deals can often go into the rough. Competitive tension doesn't stop at heads of terms. And that might sound quite weird, and you might think I've contradicted myself, that heads of terms is exclusive. Yes, it is, but the threat of competition's still there. Because if the deal collapses in DD, and you've got 3 other offers, you've got other people to go back to if the deal collapses and due diligence is over. And it's important, without over-egging it, it's important that the acquirer that you've chosen knows that there are other alternatives. So competitive tension can still work even in a period of exclusivity when you're with one potential buyer. They need to be aware that you don't, if they're going to start mucking you around on the terms and start being unreasonable, you can bring it to a halt. You don't want to, because you want to get it done. But they need to be aware. So competitive tension goes through right to the end until the money's in your bank account. So, a shorter session. What were your learnings from this? What you're going to implement, and when, and how are you going to keep yourself accountable for those actions? On that same form, you're now 5/6 of the way through. You're almost there. There's one more session to go. Thank you.